Hi, I'm Alex, 35, and last summer I bought my parents a $500,000 lakefront villa. It wasn't just a house. It was the ultimate apology, the payoff for every missed birthday and stressed out holiday dinner where I was glued to my laptop. I'd spent 10 years grinding in the tech world, living off takeout and coffee fumes, all to make this one massive, life-changing gesture. The place was stunning, vaulted ceilings, a huge stone fireplace, and a private dock where they could finally watch the sunset without the sound of city traffic. When I handed them the deed, my dad looked like he was about to spontaneously combust with joy. He was shaking, teary, repeating, "I can't believe this, son," over and over. But my mother, Clara? She took the massive, embossed leather folder from my hand, glanced at the keys, and then looked past me, completely unfazed, already eyeing the wraparound deck. Her entire reaction was summarized in a tone that could freeze boiling water. "Oh, a house, that's nice. Does it have room for my new antique china cabinet?" The air went thin right there. I thought maybe she was in shock, that the full weight of the gift hadn't landed yet. But the shock was all mine, because over the next few weeks, as they settled into this incredible dream home, my mother acted as though the house had been delivered by Amazon Prime. No messy human intermediary required. She wouldn't call me back when I visited. She'd talk exclusively to my father about the new landscaping, referencing me only in the third person if she needed a technical favor, like, ask him if the Wi-Fi reaches the gazebo. I hadn't just bought them a house. I'd apparently purchased my own invisibility cloak. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she thought the expense meant I was irresponsible. Maybe she thought it was dirty money. Which, for the record, it wasn't. It was just a lot of money. But the silent treatment wasn't just passive. It felt intentional, like a performance art piece called "The Son Who Doesn't Exist." My dad was getting uncomfortable, too. He kept pulling me aside, whispering, "She's just overwhelmed, Alex, it's a big change." But the look in his eyes said, "I have no idea what's happening, and I'm terrified." The truly bizarre moment came when I went over to install their new security system. My official excuse to be there, since otherwise, I was just some ghost haunting the foyer. I was on a ladder, feeding a wire through the attic vent, when I overheard her talking to her sister and Carol on the phone. "Yes, we love the place," she said, her voice dripping with casual luxury. "It just sort of fell into our lap, you know? A wonderful opportunity presented itself." She didn't mention my name, not once. She didn't even use a vague descriptor like, "My son." She made it sound like they won the house in a raffle or found it buried in a treasure chest. I nearly fell off the ladder. I wasn't looking for a medal, but maybe a simple "Alex helped us out" would have been nice, just to acknowledge the decade of my life I'd traded for her Lakeview. Instead, I got a wonderful opportunity. I started to wonder if this wasn't about the money at all, but about something much older and much sharper that the villa had somehow triggered. The tension finally boiled over during the so-called casual housewarming. My dad insisted on hosting a small, carefully curated gathering of close family friends and cousins. I was trying to appear relaxed, nursing a beer by the massive picture window overlooking the lake. When the moment arrived, delivered by my Aunt Betty, who is genetically incapable of subtlety, Betty cornered my mother by the granite kitchen island, gushing about the sheer scale of the generosity. "Clara, honestly, Alex has always been a good boy, but this is beyond generous. We all know how hard he worked for this." My mother, who was meticulously arranging artisanal cheeses like she was defusing a bomb, finally put down her knife and gave Betty a look that could curdle milk. I stopped breathing, knowing this was it. The moment she'd finally acknowledged the reality. What she said next didn't just shock me. It felt like a surgical strike to the core of my identity. "Well, Betty, it's certainly comfortable," she began, her tone measured and falsely sweet. "But Alex wasn't always so available, was he? He worked hard, yes, but he missed a lot of life. He missed 10 years of family dinners, 10 years of Christmases where he was on a call, 10 years of just being here, this house." She paused, gesturing with a delicate wrist movement that included the entire $500,000 view. "This house isn't a gift, dear, it's severance pay. It's the check he finally wrote to close the account on his absence. And frankly, the interest rate on the last decade of my time is much, much higher." The room felt like it had dropped 50 degrees. Betty's jaw went slack. My father, across the room, looked like he was about to make a heroic dive into the lake just to escape, but I couldn't move. In that single, brutal sentence, she hadn't just minimized my sacrifice. She had twisted my ultimate act of love into a transaction of guilt, a cold, calculated reimbursement for my supposed failure as a son. It wasn't about the villa, or the money, or the view, it was about her resentment that I had chosen a demanding life that didn't revolve around her, and the house was merely the large, physical manifestation of my guilt, which she was determined to hold over me forever. The pain was immediate and physical, a cold, sharp stab, replacing the vague confusion I'd felt earlier with crystalline, focused anger. The gift wasn't enough. Nothing I did would ever be enough. The villain wasn't my ambition. It was her need for control, and this new villa, ironically, was her grand stage. I didn't storm out. That's what a less emotionally exhausted person would have done. Instead, I calmly walked over to the open box containing the Wi-Fi router I was supposed to install, picked up the instruction manual, and folded it meticulously in half, then in quarters. My hands were shaking, but my voice, when I finally spoke, was dangerously steady. "You know, Mom," I said, catching her eye over the top of Aunt Betty's stunned silence. "That's a fascinating perspective. I always thought a gift was something you gave freely, without expectation of anything in return. I thought it was an expression of love, but you're right. If this is severance pay, then let's treat it like a business negotiation." She actually tilted her head, a flicker of something. Was it challenge? Was it victory, crossing her face? "Go on, Alex," she prompted, folding her arms. "I'm always interested in a negotiation." The sheer audacity of her agreeing to the premise that the house was a transaction, not a gift, lit a fire under me. "The terms of severance," I continued, pressing the router manual into the palm of my hand so hard the cardboard bent, "are usually pretty clear. The employee, in this case me, the son who was absent, pays the fee. The employer, you, the aggrieved mother, signs the papers and moves on. The debt is paid, the ledger is cleared." I let that sink in. Everyone in the kitchen was now frozen, watching what had turned from a housewarming into a hostile corporate takeover of the family dynamic. "So," I concluded, looking right at the 10-foot bay window that was the main feature of her new living room, "if this house is the final payment for my absence, then I am officially done paying. The debt is settled, which means I owe you nothing more, not my time, not my guilt, and certainly not the effort of trying to earn your approval." I gave her a curt, polite nod, the kind you give to a vendor whose contract has just expired. Then, I put the manual back in the box, and without another word to anyone, I walked out the front door, leaving the Lakefront Villa and the stunned silence behind me. The drive home was the quietest, most clarifying experience of my life. The silence that followed part 4 was, predictably, deafening, for 2 full weeks. My mother did not call. My father called 3 days later, his voice sounding like it was trapped under 50 feet of water. He didn't yell or take sides. He just kept repeating, "Alex, please, we need to talk. This is tearing the family apart." I told him, as calmly as I could, that there was nothing to talk about. The terms had been set by Mom. The house was severance. The contract was closed. I told him I loved him, but I was done auditioning for the role of good son in a play where the director had already decided to replace me. This level of emotional distance was new for me. I usually hated conflict, but now, the peace I felt was intoxicating. I was finally free from the impossible standards she had always set then. The true ridiculousness of the situation started to emerge. My mother began sending passive-aggressive proxies. First, it was Aunt Carol, who called me with a voice dripping with forced sweetness, asking, "Is everything all right, dear? Your mother is so stressed about the gardening." I shut that down immediately. "Aunt Carol," I said, "Mom owns the house. She can hire a landscaper. I am not the family's concierge service anymore." Then came the really petty stuff. She started liking and commenting on the social media posts of my estranged cousin, Mark, a guy who once tried to sell me a clearly broken jet ski. She was using Facebook to perform a mother-son relationship with the nearest available replacement. My dad, bless his perpetually anxious heart, even started texting me pictures of the new patio furniture they bought, complete with captions like, "Your mother said she thinks you would have picked the navy cushions." As a desperate attempt to include me in the domestic sphere I had just been excommunicated from, but I held firm. The guilt mechanism she had always relied on was finally busted. The $500,000 villa was now a fortress, and I was finally standing outside, feeling the sun for the first time. My father, realizing his subtle attempts at digital reconciliation were failing spectacularly, finally showed up on my doorstep unannounced. He looked completely defeated, less like a man enjoying his dream retirement and more like a hostage negotiator whose coffee had run cold. He walked in, sat heavily on my pristine, minimalist sofa, and the first thing he said, sighing deeply, was, "Alex, she's talking about the chimney?" I looked at him, completely confused. "The chimney? What about the chimney, Dad?" He waved a dismissive, trembling hand. "The one in the living room, it's perfectly fine, you know? Beautiful stone, works great, but she's decided it's too rustic. She wants to have it completely refaced with polished Italian marble, and she's insisting that you must know a contractor who can do it at a reasonable rate because, quote, Alex should handle the structural details since he sourced the original asset." The absurdity of it was astounding. After declaring my gift severance pay and publicly disowning my emotional investment, she was now attempting to leverage the very transaction she defined to demand free, high-end labor and connections for cosmetic upgrades. It wasn't just about the chimney. It was a test, a deliberate attempt to see if my boundaries were real, or if I would crumble back into the role of the obedient, resource-rich son who would jump whenever she snapped her fingers, just to buy a temporary reprieve from her icy disdain. I crossed my arms, feeling the old, familiar knot of obligation tighten, only to immediately cut it loose. "Dad, the original asset, as you put it, was a complete, move-in ready house with a perfectly functional chimney," I said, leaning forward. "If she wants Italian marble, she can hire a contractor and pay for it herself. She has a house that's worth $500,000. The money is clearly not the issue. The issue is that she is still treating me like her personal procurement manager." My dad's face crumpled. "But Alex, she's starting to tell people that the chimney is falling apart. She's making it sound like you gave us a lemon. She even told the bridge club that the house has structural issues that need immediate fixing, and that you promised to take care of it." He looked truly desperate. "She's using this house, this beautiful thing you did, to create drama and to make you look bad, and I can't take it anymore. I'm living in a marble-fueled war zone, and I need you to just fix the damn chimney so she'll quiet down." His plea was heartbreaking, the surrender of a good man who had been ground down by years of emotional manipulation. But I knew I couldn't cave. If I fixed the chimney, I would simply be endorsing her narrative. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said, putting my hand on his shoulder. "I'm not fixing the chimney. I'm not playing her game. She needs to understand that I meant what I said. The account is closed. If she wants a different house, she can sell this one and buy it, but I am not going to let her use my gift to destroy my peace." He sat there for a long time, the silence stretching taut between us, a shared understanding finally settling. The true structural issue wasn't the fireplace, it was the foundation of their entire relationship, and it was my mother, not the house, that was crumbling. The fallout from my refusal to engage in Operation Chimney Facelift was swift and theatrical. My mother escalated from passive-aggressive social media maneuvers to outright public performance. She organized a small gathering for her garden club, which coincidentally included several neighbors, and while giving them a tour of the grounds, she stopped directly in front of the perfectly functional stone fireplace my father had mentioned. She stood there, her posture the picture of elegant distress, and launched into a truly staggering monologue about the challenges of homeownership when dealing with inherited structural deficiencies. She didn't name me directly, that would be too honest, but the context was inescapable. "It's just such a shame," she lamented, sighing deeply for dramatic effect. "To be in such a lovely location, only to worry constantly about the integrity of the main hearth. We were promised everything was up to code, of course, but it seems there are always hidden expenses, hidden problems." She made it sound like I had handed them a crumbling shack with a bow on top, implying that my success was built on shoddy construction and false pretenses. My father called me again later that day, not to plead, but to offer a truly surreal piece of information. "Alex, you're not going to believe this," he whispered into the phone, sounding like a spy transmitting top-secret intel. "She went and bought a tiny, portable electric fireplace, a fake one, and she set it up directly in front of the actual, Enormous stone fireplace. She says the original one is unsafe to look at until it's completely redone. The image was so profoundly absurd, so perfectly illustrative of her desire to deny reality and replace it with a glittering, flimsy substitute, that I actually laughed out loud. It was the first time I had genuinely laughed since the housewarming party. The real fireplace, the massive, beautiful one I had envisioned them cozying up to on cold evenings, was being obscured by a cheap plastic imposter emitting fake flickering LED flames. That's when the ultimate realization hit me. My mother wasn't fighting me for the house. She was fighting the reality of the gift itself. She couldn't accept the massive, unconditional, and unearned love that the villa represented because accepting it meant acknowledging a kind of vulnerability and interdependence she clearly despised, by turning it into severance pay, and then inventing structural deficiencies. She was neutralizing the emotional weight of my generosity and replacing it with the familiar, controllable terrain of victimhood and transaction. The electric fireplace was the perfect metaphor for her entire relationship with me, a cheap, superficial barrier placed directly in front of the real warmth and connection, simply because the real thing was too big and too honest for her to handle. I told my dad to tell her, very clearly, that if she truly believed the house had structural issues, she should contact a real estate lawyer. And I suggested she bring the original deed, the one signed by me. That was my final move in this ridiculous, expensive chess game, forcing her to face the legality of the gift, not the manufactured drama of her hurt feelings. My father, bless his stubborn soul, actually delivered my message. He told her to contact a real estate lawyer if she genuinely thought the property had been misrepresented as having structural issues, and to bring the deed. For 3 days there was absolute silence from the lakeside fortress. This was unusual. Normally, Clara would have launched a counteroffensive immediately, perhaps calling my former boss to complain about my childhood behavior, or starting a GoFundMe for her unsafe chimney. But nothing, just dead air. I knew she was stewing, calculating, perhaps even consulting someone. Because the prospect of involving legal professionals forced her out of the realm of emotional blackmail, and into the cold, hard world of contracts, a world she had, ironically, insisted on entering when she defined the house as severance pay. Then, on the 4th day, I received an email, not a text, not a call, but a formally addressed email, titled, Villa Transaction. It was brief, written in the stiff, formal language of someone trying to maintain an upper hand, but couldn't quite mask the underlying panic. Alex, after careful consideration and consultation, I have determined that while the property is structurally sound, your recent actions have created an untenable atmosphere. The debt we discussed, which you claim to have settled, has merely transformed. You have replaced the debt of absence with the debt of obligation, a far heavier burden. This house, while financially significant, has become a symbol of your ongoing need to define my happiness through monetary means, rather than genuine familial engagement. Therefore, as the primary beneficiary of the severance package, I have chosen to exercise my right to redefine the terms of this arrangement. Effective immediately, the house will be put on the market. The proceeds will be split, with a portion to be used to purchase a smaller, less ostentatious residence for your father and myself, one that is financially manageable and less tied to external expectations. The remaining, substantial amount will be placed into a trust fund for your future children, should you have them, or a charity of my choosing, should you not. In this way, the asset can finally be decoupled from the emotional toxicity you have infused into it. I believe this is the only way for all parties to move forward without the constant weight of your gift hanging over our heads. Clara. I read the email 3 times, leaning back in my office chair. My first reaction was a burst of surprised admiration for the sheer, unadulterated gall of the move. She was going to sell my gift, take some of the cash, and unilaterally establish a trust fund in my name with the rest, thus proving that she could maintain control even over the disposition of the asset. It was the ultimate power play. She was erasing the evidence of the original gift, while simultaneously attempting to reposition herself as the responsible matriarch managing my finances for the future. But then, a genuinely calming peace settled over me. It was over. She was selling the house. The entire $500,000 anchor that she had used to drag me down with her manufactured guilt was about to be lifted. I called my father immediately. He admitted he knew she was thinking about it but had been too scared to tell me. Dad, I said, my voice light with relief. I think this is the best news I've had all year. You do? He stammered. But your house, Alex. It was their house, Dad, and they are free to do whatever they want with it. I corrected him. She wants to sell it to gain control, and I am letting her. She can have the control, I get the freedom. I told him not to worry, that I was fine, and that when they moved into the less ostentatious house, I would finally come over for a visit, because then, and only then, would the visit be about them, and not about a $500,000 piece of real estate designed to settle a score. A few months later, the villa sold. My mother did exactly as she promised. She and my father moved into a charming, much smaller home closer to the city, and the remainder of the money went into a trust. When I finally visited their new place, it was small, but cozy, and most importantly, it was quiet. There was no grand lake view, no Italian marble demands, and no massive stone fireplace. The electric one was gone too. My mother, sitting on a modest, non-granite countertop stool, offered me a cup of tea. It's certainly practical, she commented, looking around the small kitchen, not meeting my eye. It is, I agreed, taking a slow sip. And you know what's great about practical? It leaves no room for performance. She finally looked up at me, a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of her mouth. She didn't argue, she didn't apologize, but as I left that day, she actually walked me to the door, put a hand lightly on my arm, and said, "Drive safely, Alex." It was the most normal, most genuinely parental thing she had said to me in over a year. She finally stopped trying to pay off the debt of my success, and in selling the villa, she finally bought herself, and me, something priceless, a tiny piece of reality. The account wasn't closed by the house. It was closed when the house was gone.